Hello, and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. And friends, I never make any claims that I'm going to simplify easy topics. This one today is a doozy of one. We're going to talk about your money, and we're going to talk about if you are about to have a breakup or a divorce. So grab your butts. We are going straight in. My special guest today is Lisa Linfield. She's back on the podcast once again, and she's a personal finance expert, a keynote speaker, course creator, and the host of her own podcast, Working Women's Wealth. She's a board-certified financial advisor, and she is also the CEO of a wealth and investment management business called Southern Pride Wealth. Now, you know she's got 20 years of financial services experience, both in the UK and South Africa, if you've heard our last episode with her together. She's also been featured in Forbes, Thrive Global, Contemporary Business, Investing for Life, and so many more. Her goal is to teach 1 million women about money, how to make it, how to invest it, and of course, how to protect it. So I'd like to welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, Lisa Linfield. Hey, Lisa.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
I'm glad you're here. And I just want to skip the whole episode and let's just go have cocktails instead, because I'm sure there are quite a few women out there that are going, oh God, I do need this information, but I know it's kind of scary and big. Where do we even begin, Lisa?
So for me, divorce is such a real challenge. And fundamentally, it's because money is an expression of what's going on in our life. So when it comes to divorce, it is naturally going to express the anger, the loss of control or control issues. It's going to express the hurt, the desire for vengeance. So it is really one of those things that permeates every level of interaction, from when you start thinking about a divorce to way afterwards when it comes to child maintenance issues, etc. So it never leaves the room in the discussion. Mm-hmm. Having said that, I think one of the things to always bear in mind is that it is just a symptom. And often if we dig deeper and deal the real issues through the divorce, the money issues can be lightened somewhat. It's never gone completely, but it can be lightened somewhat.
Yeah, so here's what I'm thinking where we'll go with this conversation. We'll talk about things to do before a divorce is kind of coming along the way, what to do during the divorce, and then what to do post-divorce, once everything, the deal has been inked and all that. So let's break it down in those three ways. So first off, what do you think are a few mistakes that you've seen as a financial planner that your clients or other people have made before they even decide to separate?
I think one of the things is that they're naive. Maybe it's not naive, is that one never thinks it can get that bad, that all of these examples that we see around us of bad divorces, that will never be us. We'll never get to that level. And so we don't do the work and the homework that we need to do, even in the discussion phase. So we don't really engage as to what we'll need after divorce early on. And what that means is that we're unprepared. And in being unprepared for it, there are many people that I speak to who after divorce go, I wish I really knew how much money I needed, because I would have gone about the entire thing differently. And there's that expression which says start with the end in mind. And being very clear of that end. And it's not just financially, it's also emotionally. I was speaking to a person the other day and said, if I knew how hard it would be to kind of redo life after a divorce, I would have worked harder to stay married. And I think that realistic view of not only the relational side, but also the financial side makes one reframe the negotiations after the decision has been made. So even when, not often do we suddenly decide overnight that we're going to get a divorce. There is often a period leading up that might include counseling, it might include more discussions and things. When those signs start to appear, be very clear to engage and be very clear to understand that, for example, if you have children, you're with this person forever. I always say to young people, marriage can come and go. Children means that you're with their father forever. So by saying, oh, well, I'm going to get divorced and therefore there will be no father, that doesn't work. The father of your children will always be involved. So be very clear about the pathway and start collecting information as soon as possible. Start becoming more aware of the finances. Start understanding more where they come from, so that when you do start the negotiation, you're negotiating with facts, but not with wishy-washy notions that don't kind of work when it comes to the hard negotiations of money.
Yeah. And, gosh, I have heard it from lots of my girlfriends and also listeners of our podcast as well, where it's like, well, he just handles the finances. I just pay into a joint bank account and he sort of just pays out all the things. So there's so many people. And I'll be the first to admit, I have gone through seasons of my marriage like that as well, where you're just like, well, it's just sort of get taken, direct debit. You don't even think that you just don't know where the money is coming from and where the money is going out from. Is that part of the information collecting part that you're talking about?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the reality about it is that in very few marriages do both parties know everything about it. So she may manage the day-to-day expenses, but he manages the investments. Or he may manage the day-to-day expenses and she manages the investments. But either way, it's not usual that both parties do both things and have, the monthly financial meeting that we're all supposed to have. Right. And sometimes one partner does everything and the other partner does nothing. You're really putting yourself on a very bad position if you're heading into a divorce having no clue about the finances. And it sounds hard to say, but truly, if you want to set yourself up and protect your children, if not yourself, protect your children through this process and the business you've worked so hard to create yourself.
Right.
You need to step on the front foot and you need to engage it. It is not good enough to say, well, I don't do money. Mm-hmm. Because, I see so many women post-divorce left with nothing and wishing that they'd actually just pulled up their socks and got into really understanding the stuff. How much does it cost to live? How much does it cost to feed these children? What is the schooling cost? How much money do I need going forward? What is the state of our retirement funds? How much money is available? And you can get into the forensic auditors and all of that kind of stuff. But the minute you're getting into that level, it's a lot of money. So rather just start keeping on track with your money from the very first time. Start tracking it. Just a feeling of how much is going out, because many people have no idea how much goes out.
Right. Because, if you're listening and you run your own business, you probably do this for your business, right? You track revenue coming in, you track the invoices that you're paying out to clients and you want to get them to pay in, right? And you're tracking the money that's going out for running your overhead of your business and paying your employees and contractors. You're doing the same general stuff there. It's now taking that lens and putting it onto your home finances and all that. I also wonder if there's a bit of, well, I don't want to rock the boat. If I start asking him about his bank accounts, if I start asking her about blah, 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 will she or he feel threatened by this? What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, divorces are
just do it.
No, divorces are mostly adversarial, and it is going to get that way. Yeah. The science of the brain says the minute you start focusing on something, your brain will start seeking out information to support that data.
100%.
So if you are thinking of this divorce, then one of the things you need to start thinking about is, how do I get on top of the money? And he might be saying things along the way that could add to your set of data pool. You might not need to ask him directly. That will come, but at least start being much more mindful. Okay, I have a client who for a year has been thinking about divorce. And over that period of time, she has just been collecting data more and more. She's not certain in her heart that she wants to walk away from a 27-year marriage, but she thinks she does. And so she has started to just collect the data points as she's going, as to what is happening, what's going on, where is the money going, in gentle, subtle ways. Very seldom do marriages suddenly come undone, and if there's a niggle in your tummy, it is great practice to get on top of your finances. Full stop. It's even more important if you're considering a divorce. So, these are the things that you need to go together. Research shows that people who fight about money at least once a week have a 30% more likelihood of getting divorced. Wow. So if you're on that traction, then you need to start really kind of engaging deeply about how you resolve this issue so that you don't end up getting divorced. I think the worst option in many circumstances is getting divorced if one could have learned how to talk about money better in the first place. It is one of the highest indicators of divorce because it reflects so much else. He might be controlling you with money, or you might be controlling him with money, or someone's spending habits is an issue. Fundamentally, one of the issues is respect for each other. So it's just a symptom. So it's best that if you are even in the pre-stages, that you step back and say, okay, hold on. This conversation is not actually about money. There's something deeper than this. And try and resolve it before you get to breaking up a home, clearly.
Yeah. So it sounds to me when I hear you say that, like collecting all the information, if I was in this situation, then I would want to know about, okay, what bank accounts exist, not only our joint bank accounts, my personal bank accounts, my business bank accounts, any personal bank accounts that he has, business bank accounts if he runs his own business as well. Is there investments, stocks, assets,
all of their assets and all of the liabilities. So how much do we own and how much do we owe? Okay. And people forget about that is depending on where you live, depends the rules of the game. And that's one of the things you have to understand. So the minute you start discussing a divorce, you need to understand what are the rules in my country. So if, for example, you're in America, every single state has the choice of which marital property regime it runs. And a marital property regime basically says the laws of splitting the assets when this marriage ends. Mm-hmm. So 9 of them have in community of property and the rest of them don't. In the UK, they do not acknowledge either community of property or actually antenuptial contracts. Mm-hmm. So the judge at the end of it decides. In South Africa, you have antenuptial contracts, you have community of property, and then you have a system called accrued, which splits the assets as well. What is important is that you know what applies to your specific circumstance and what are the rules. Because some of the things that people always forget about is businesses. So if you're married in a place where you share everything if the marriage dissolves, half of your business is his and half of his business is yours. Half of your bank accounts are his and half of his stuff is yours. But also half of the debt. So if you're going to walk away from a marriage because you guys are in a lot of debt, understand that debt will follow you when you go, And I think that's part of the whole process of being much more mindful, is that when you start collecting all of this information, yes, there's information that relates to your specific circumstance, but hugely is the information of the rules. I know that many people have this concept of a fault divorce. Well, he went off and had an affair, so therefore I should get all the assets. Mm-hmm. In most countries, that doesn't exist. So lose the notion that you can get retribution through the courts, because the courts often will take the position of it takes 2 to tango in a marriage. We're not going back as to what you did 15 years ago that made him upset, that made him then have the affair. So if you understand the rules, then you can go in and really get to what is yours. Because if 50% of everything is yours, that's the rule. And there is no emotion that goes about it. And so often I see in particular women acquiescing, giving up for peace. Mm-hmm. And I keep saying to them, the law says that you're entitled to half. Therefore, do not feel bad or do not feel greedy or do not feel mean. You have built this together, even if you stay at home and have a tiny little business that earns relatively nothing compared to your husband's big business. It is your joint asset if that's how you married. If it's not how you married, then be clear that you must need to understand where your assets are and get someone to really help you negotiate.
And that's a financial planner, right? Not your lawyer, not your divorce lawyer, right?
So I think the opportunity is the and, not the or. When it comes to divorce, the minute you start getting massive lawyers involved, the expenses go, the only person that wins are the lawyers because the expenses go through the roof. So my advice to people always is, if you can, mediate. Mediate first. And then, for example, depending on where you live, you might have to get it, for example, in England, it has to get sanctioned by a judge. So it has to go through that process. But in other countries, the mediation process can be an extremely much cheaper, much more efficient and fair process that the lawyers don't get rich from. The advantage of having a financial advisor with this whole thing is the experience of understanding how to position yourself in a financial discussion. So I, for example, do a lot of divorce mediation, the financial part, not the who gets the kids and how much your visitation.
Right.
And the reason for that is because there is an art as well as a science to it. And what I find many times is that people want to split everything in half, and they don't take into consideration the emotional aspect of these assets. So, for example, I had a couple, they were about to sell everything, split it in half. And I said, but hold on. He wants this property and you want these shares. We can balance this. We can divide this pie many different ways. It doesn't have to be a one-for-one nitpicking exercise that actually incurs so much expense because, for example, selling houses is expensive. It might be the wrong time in the market. It might be all of that. If one of you wants the house and the other one wants all the retirement funds, go for it, and you'll often find that because human beings have different thinking styles. And when it comes to money, some people like concrete things. They want the house and they want the children taken care of and all of that in a house. And other people say, I'm quite happy to not have a house. I'm quite happy to move into the rental and find it, So having both a financial person and a legal person enables you to get a better sense of what it is. But also the financial planner is the person who's going to take you through the divorce into managing your money on the other side. Because what also happens is sometimes you think you're getting this massive amount of money, and in actual fact, it's not enough to last you for the rest of your life. In fact, you're going to have to drastically cut your life. So you need to have someone that's being able to say, well, if you give up this, understand that the impact is that your children can no longer go to that school. They need to go to a smaller school, and understand that you can no longer afford the house, because that often refocuses the strength a human being needs to go through such a brutal process. Divorce affects your identity. It affects your sense of self. It affects your children, your life, your happiness. It affects everything through you. It is a brutal process, even in the best divorce. So, but make sure that you don't give up so soon because of the hurt and the pain. And that's when having people to say to you, okay, you can give up now, but if you do, just seriously understand the impact of it. And what I often see down the track, in particular women, is where they go, he's now taking my kids on amazing holidays with his new wife, and I don't even have the ability to go on a local weekend away. And it's like, yes, but you gave up too soon and you didn't have enough information and you didn't go into this understanding that when things go pear-shaped, it's not all fair in love. Because it comes, that line between love and hate in a divorce can be a really difficult thing, and people can lose a lot, and it's you're entitled, you built this life together.
Yeah, and I mean,
understand your rights.
You've talked so much on so many points that I've heard from friends and have gone through this process. And, one of the things that I think is interesting and also heartbreaking is just how people react and how people what they turn into when their money is at jeopardy, right? Like they turn into the worst self, the worst versions of themselves when you have money in the middle, I find, and especially if they feel like money is their definition of freedom and you are trying to take that away from me.
Absolutely. And one of the challenges about it, so I have the most wonderful husband. I absolutely adore him. But having done so many divorces and known couples from way before the divorce and known them afterwards, I will never make the assumption that my husband and I would ever have a great divorce.
Yeah.
And I think we're two very nice humans. I cannot imagine us being ugly to each other like I've seen. I mean, I've seen the worst of humanity through a divorce.
Yeah.
But it happens so often that I think it is wise to know that the likelihood of it going pear-shaped is high. And also, what I also see, and this has been a very interesting thing for me, is that the situation is fluid. Because you might have a good divorce, might be fair. You might even get on and be sitting next to each other at the school play for the first 2 years and everything's fine.
Yeah.
And then you move on and he moves on. And oh my goodness, all of that anger that was kind of shoved to the side as you went through the divorce comes through in a massive way, and maintenance gets withheld and things happen and it goes. So I always say these things are fluid. For now, you might be going through a good divorce, but understand your information so accurately, keep such good records through the process, really be clear on what you want out of it, understand your best case, your worst case, your ideal case, all of that stuff, so that you can hold firm when it goes pear-shaped. I don't think there are many if it goes pear-shaped. I just think it's when. You're dealing with two human beings that are hurting.
Yeah.
And hurting people hurt other people. And the two ways they hurt is money and children. That's it. And those are the two biggest ways, because that's all they have left that ties them together.
Yeah.
So you really need to be clear on centering yourself and really understanding your whys. Why are you fighting like this? Why are you going for that? What is it? Why is that so important? Because when you get to the bottom of it, why is he fighting like that? What is his issue? When you get to the bottom of it, you can then start having a proper negotiation. When it's just about who keeps the silver, there's something different going on there,
Yeah.
And getting your money and your children separated, you're dealing with your Maslow's basic hierarchy of needs: safety and security and provision and protection of my little cublets.
Yeah.
And if my little cubs are under any form of threat, be it from their father or be it from the circumstance and the unhappiness of the divorce, I'm going to behave badly.
Yeah.
So will he.
Yeah. Wolf, I feel like we need to take a breath at this point. If anyone's listening to this episode and, on the verge of tears, Lisa is here as a guiding light, and she's not here to scare us. It's just simply education. And what it comes up for me when I think about it, I've been married 14 years. Also, it's hard to imagine a divorce, but if it were to happen, it does make my heart palpitate with the idea, is that any situation that's really scary that I've ever had to tackle, either personally or professionally, any situation, the fear rises when I'm uneducated in the situation, right? Like I don't understand what I'm doing. I don't understand what I'm supposed to do to get out of this. It's just I'm operating in a place of fear because I just don't know the facts. And so what I hear you say here is to educate yourself by understanding your finances, understanding the incomings and outgoings, all of the things in there. And I think that when you educate yourself, you become less fearful. You become more grounded in making good decisions to navigate the future, right?
Absolutely. And also, when we encounter these difficulties in our professional and our personal lives, but especially our professional lives, one of the things we always say is have a vision in mind of what you're wanting to get, where you're wanting to get to.
Right.
What does this ideal future look like? So if you've got a little business and you're needing to suddenly learn tax or income and expenses or any of the operating profit, your instinct is to run away.
Mm-hmm.
Your tool is to educate.
Yeah.
But you will only do it if your vision is big enough for a better future. Then you say, okay, actually, if I can just suck it up, learn this stuff, I will achieve the new revenue and new clients and big business that I want to build. It's the same thing if you go on diet. You say, okay, if I just suck it up and I learn about all these banting things and ketones and all of this kind of stuff, which sounds confusing now. If I do the work to learn about it, I can have this great health and energy and fitness and wellness. It's the same thing when it comes to this. You're changing the phase of life. You have probably held a vision from being a little girl or a little boy that you're going to have, this wonderful marriage that's going to last forever, 2.5 kids and the golden retriever, and it's all going to be lovely. And the biggest part that I keep saying to people is, what is your vision for after this? And they go, I can't. I'm just trying to get through today. And I totally understand it. I by no means understand that survival is a key element in going through something this difficult. But like everything, if we have a strong enough vision that pulls us through this, we can then find the energy to find the human to help us understand these money issues, law issues, settlement things. All of this is learnable. We just need to have a desire big enough to overcome our fear of and paralysis of I can't deal with this.
Yeah.
And that future vision is amazing. When you actually stop and you say, hey, I'm not divorcing this man for a worser life. I'm divorcing this man for the hope of a better life. I'm divorcing this man for happy children, a happy life, whether it's with or without another human. You might not have the ability to think about that at that stage, but at least think of a happiness and a life for you and your children of joy and freedom and vision, and I think that's what we all need for everything. But we forget how important it is when you're about to make such a fundamental shift in something you've held important to you for your whole life. Regardless of whether you think you did or didn't, marriage has been read to us from fairy tales in books because the prince and the princess lived happily ever after. So you're fundamentally shifting that. So what does this new future look like? What is the thing? And is your vision worth it? And if the answer is yes, my vision is worth it, you write it down, you keep it clear, and then you every single day get yourself the strength to equip yourself to have this particular battle. But if you're clear about the fact that you want happy children at the end of it, you make sure your children aren't used as pawns in the middle of this process. If you care about the fact that you want your mental health, that you want to be happy, you must be clear about the fact that it's going to take some work to get rid of that feeling of anger, betrayal, failure, whatever it is. So embrace, as Brené Brown says, embrace the suck. This process sucks. I mean, there's no easier, well, there are a lot more explicit words that you could use, but it really is not easy. But at least move forward to something that is good and strong.
And it's better. And I think that that's also a critical part of it. Anything, like any big change that you're navigating, is if you believe that you can get to that future outcome. If you think you're stuck in this forever and you have zero control and he did this to me, you're going to be stuck in it forever, right? So it really requires you also to take the big mental leap to say, you know what, no, it sucks right now. And yes, it is kind of horrible, but we're going to get through this, and there is even little bitty bits and pieces that I could do every single day to get me over this hump and to something better, right?
And also being very clear that your children, what they watch and what they see and what they hear will be fundamental to who they become. So if they watch you lying to their father, when they're teenagers and lying to you, that's one of the challenges. And it's one of the things that I keep saying is that, especially when it comes to young children, what I witness through all the divorces that I support is that the children pass the information between one house and another because they don't know that you're supposed to lie to each other through this process because they haven't learned it up until now and they don't want it going forward. So when you go through this as much as one can humanly, which is very, like none of us, we are all going to mess this up at some stage. But have that vision of the kind of children you want to bring up. And then make sure that you're that person who models that behavior for those children. Because they're the ones that are going to watch it, and they're going to watch the two people they love most in the world closest in terms of setting that example.
So I know that I've heard you on your podcast and through your blog talk about the 5 whys. What is that technique and how do we implement this?
So I use it, and I write a lot about it actually in the book that I'm releasing in May called Deep Grooves. For me, one of the things that we are supremely talented at doing is kidding ourselves. We allow ourselves to believe the good reasons in life, and the good reason is that are the things that we are socially acceptable out there to tell ourselves and to tell other people. But the challenge is, until you get to the real reasons, you can't fix whatever the problem it is that you're solving because you're treating the symptom and not the cure.
Right.
And in my book, I talk about the example of I've got a sore foot, so I'm going to put some cream on it. But if the foot is broken and it needs a pin through surgery, the cream is never going to help. And that's the same as going through this process. So let's say that, for example, you want primary custody of the children. And you sit there and you go, why do I want primary custody of the children? And the answer is because I'm a better parent. Easy enough for us to tell ourselves. But why am I a better parent?
Yeah.
Well, because he's unreliable. So why do I say he's unreliable? Well, because he never does those adult things like make them do their homework, eat their vegetables, all of that. I have to do all of that. And when they come home from him or any of that stuff, they haven't eaten their vegetables, they haven't done their homework. Then it says, well, does that actually make him a worse parent? Well, maybe not, because in actual fact, they always come home from his place happy. So yes, they haven't done their homework, and yes, they might not have eaten vegetables, but they come from his place loved.
Yeah.
So is he really such a bad parent? Or am I just trying to make myself feel better and put him down and feel worse? And the reality about it is because that's what you're going to say to your kids. Yeah, but you see, your silly dad, he hasn't done homework with you, you haven't eaten enough vegetables and all that kind of stuff. And they sit there going, but I've just had the most wonderful time and I feel loved by my daddy.
Yeah.
And now you're telling me that my daddy is awful because I haven't eaten vegetables. And that's the kind of thing where I say you have to ask 5 whys. Why do you think he's this? Why do you think he's that? And for all of us, we can only work on our truth. We can't work on something that's anybody else's reason. The minute it's him and he's mean and nasty and he's awful, you can't change that.
Right. And you're projecting the blame over into the other side. You're not taking ownership of your own stuff, your ish.
Absolutely. And you will never get that ideal of your happy future, your peaceful, happy, wonderful future, if you can't own your future. Yeah. And you can't own something that's someone else's problem. Yes, he might have gone off and slept with someone else. That's wrong. There's nothing that says that's wrong. But there are many whys to that, and there are many things underneath. And at the end of the day, your why has to be, if you do want to be with someone, is that I'm going to go through this. I'm going to, because I respect myself enough that I believe that at some stage I will find a human who loves and adores me. But let me look at myself and say, what are the things that I need to own in this relationship that might have led to that? Because if we are going to do this a second time round, then what we want to make sure is that we have really dealt with the things that have contributed to a marriage breakup. It's never one-sided. As much as we'd love it to be one-sided, it's never one-sided. There is always blame on both sides. And if we're going to live our best life, we have got to make sure that the things that are sit in our court, that we own them. And that at no stage do we get to the phase where we are using our children or being nasty about their father to them, if we can help it. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, they are going to learn nastiness. They are going to learn cutting people down and not building people up. They learn what they see. And, and even without even in a divorce context, there are times when I can be mean and nasty. And then I have to bring myself that evening to go and sit on my girl's bed and say, hey, I'm really sorry I behaved that way. Or I'm really sorry you saw me be cross with dad. Mum's had a bad day. Yeah. And I adore your father and think, but all of us have got to learn that, yes, if we slip, we've got to get back onto it. Because divorce is hard and you're also human and you are going to have days. But at least if you do the 5 whys, you can start to get yourself into a better position of really understanding what's going on for you, because there's so much going on for you.
Right.
So much.
It's not only the facts on the table, the numbers and the reality, but then there's the emotions underneath the table that are driving some of these bad behaviors, things that I like to say of just humans behaving badly, and understand why either you or the other party is acting the way you do. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the before the divorce, and I really want to dive into the during and then, of course, the after. So what are the two main stages there? The during is really negotiating the settlement, right?
So the during is negotiating the settlement. And the biggest and most important thing that you can ever remember about negotiating the settlement is that there are 2 things that you're negotiating. what you have backwards
Yeah.
and what you're going to need forwards. And where the mistake that I see people making is skipping this whole thing. So the first thing is that up until the point that you get divorced, the two of you have accumulated assets that you need to split. And this is not mutually, this should in no way impact what goes forward. There are assets that need to be split. But the second portion is there is maintenance that needs to be paid.
Yeah.
And that maintenance, if you are sharing 1 week on, 1 week off, there is no maintenance. You are both co-parenting and co-expensing. And that's one of the things that I see incorrect, is that people agree going forward children's arrangement of 1 week on, 1 week off, but still think that they should be getting maintenance. You're not maintaining. You're equally paying for it.
And just to clarify, when you use the word maintenance, you mean child support, things
Child
like
support,
that,
absolutely.
alimony,
Child
things
support.
like that.
Absolutely. Well, spousal support usually only exists for a limited period of time if one of the spouses has given up work to look after the children. And then there is usually a short period of time that spousal support will continue so that that person can get up and running.
Right.
Sometimes it's very short. Often it's kind of around 2 years of spousal support. And the expectation is that you can reskill. So if there's a cost of reskilling, that can often be brought into the thing. You can reskill, and then you must get up and you must support yourself.
Yeah.
If there is children who are spending most of the time with one parent, then there is child support costs that need to take care of. And that's, again, where it comes back to if you are well prepared on every cent that you've spent over a period of time, because unfortunately, things are seasonal. Yeah. So you need to know that the beginning of school costs a lot of money. The new uniforms, the new shoes, the new things they need for the grade. So it's no point being in the middle of the year and saying, well, it only costs me so much to look after the children. You need to have tracked these things over a while and taken an average of that period. And be very clear about all the costs, because also what happens is often one parent hasn't done a big grocery shop for the children or for the household or bought children's uniform ever. And they don't have a clue that it actually costs that much money. So be clear to keep your receipts, keep your stuff as you're going through this process, because at the end of the day, for any legal process, be it in your business or be it in a divorce or be it in anything, he who has the most information wins. Yeah. So make sure that it's not, well, I think I need £1,000. If it's 1,472, provide the slips for 1,472 or the average in the spreadsheet over a period of time. So splitting of the assets depends on the marital property regime, whether you're married in community of property, outside of community of property. But maintenance of the children is then where you need to really ensure that you have taken into consideration the real expenses and be very clear on how much that is, because there are always the sports tour or the cricket bat that's broken in half or the violin that needs restringing.
Right.
And there's always that kind of stuff. And be very clear as to how you guys are going to manage that. And then the big ones, healthcare costs, braces for children are very expensive. Healthcare costs and schooling are the two big costs that, in terms of looking at what you negotiate going forward, you need to make sure that you're clear of. One thing that I have found works extremely well, in particular, if you have, I'm going to say it straight out, if you have partners who are not very good at paying the maintenance. One of the things that has really worked in the negotiations I've done is that if you have expensive education bills, or expensive medical bills, or one big lump sum expense that goes to someone else externally, that often can be a good way to split. Remember what I said about assets is you don't have to slice everything in half. You don't need to pay half a school fee and he pays half a school fee. Potentially you could get all the school fees paid or all the healthcare costs paid, and you pick up groceries and things like that. Because often people don't want to lose face to an external third party, but they're fine to not pay you maintenance for your child. So these are the things that it's where experience in partnering with people who are experienced in these negotiations can really help, because there are ways to take into consideration that at the heart of all of this is emotion.
And
You know,
is it fair to say, and this is just a dumb question, but when it comes to child support and maintenance and all of that stuff, it's really only up till the youngest child turns 18, right? I mean, at that point, when the child becomes an adult, air quotes, then that disappears, right? Or is there still maintenance after that?
so it depends on what you negotiate. Most settlements negotiate only until 18, and then it's 50-50 thereafter, if there is a thereafter in terms of any form of support. Which also, for example, if you are absolutely committed that your children need a university degree, be clear that that is built into your negotiation whilst you're negotiating. Because to stop at 18 and then he says, well, they don't need a university degree. If that's something that is one of your core values, that you want to equip your children with a university degree, rightly or wrongly, it's your personal value, then make sure that's included. Make sure it doesn't stop at 18. Make sure that this maintenance and support is until 18, but education costs include a 4-year degree.
And that's needed to be outlined in paper, on writing, in your divorce decree, right?
Absolutely.
I see.
Absolutely.
So I want to go back really quickly to something that you said earlier about regardless of if your spouse, your ex is part of your business, he or she could potentially get half of that business. And I'm sure loads of people started to have heart attacks and they're palpitating on the floor and, headed straight to the wine fridge. How, as a small business owner, can we ensure that we don't lose everything in a divorce? Is there other ways to protect ourselves and our business assets?
It very much depends on the country you live in and the laws. Yeah. So in some places, you can set it up in a trust structure that can't be attached. In reality, most legal systems are moving towards the spirit of what you're trying to do. So, for example, particularly in countries like England and Wales, where the judge decides what happens, there's no marital property thing. Yeah. They might say, listen, you created this complicated structure so that you could screw her out of her money. Not a chance, half the business is hers. Yeah. And that's, again, where if you have a business before you go into a marriage. So for me, antenuptial contracts are absolutely crucial. And it doesn't matter in what country you're in, because even though, for example, England and Wales does not recognize antenuptial contracts in the extreme form, it's always taken as a guidance in the discussion that this was the intent. So if you have a business before you get married, make sure you have an antenuptial contract that says this business is excluded from the marriage. That if you do get divorced, you are able to carve out that business. Yeah. Then it also comes to what I said about, splitting the baby. You don't have to divide these things in half. You may say, listen, you keep the house, I'm keeping my business, Yeah. But if you are in a country or a state in the United States that is a community of property state, then you need to be very clear about in your negotiation strategy, considering that, because most people go, no, but it's my business. They won't or can't take my business. Well, if you happen to own Amazon, they will, and that's the reality of it, is that any business or any asset that is built through a marriage is half the spouses. And if you take particularly in the consideration where it's usually that a woman has stayed at home whilst a man has built a business, she should be entitled to half of that because he's had the space and freedom to develop that business because he hasn't had to worry about what's going on at home. She sorted that out. So it's very important that you think deeply about what do you want out of it. When the split of assets comes, if you want the full of your full business out of it, then make sure that you are less attached to the other assets in your relationship, because you also know the potential of your business. If you believe your potential is going to go 10x, then rather get your business than get a house where the property market might crash and is probably definitely not going to go 10 times in the next 10 years. Right. So, as an entrepreneur myself, I'll back myself to build a big business over I'll back a house or a thing like that. You know?
Well, and also I think what I hear from a lot of this is surround yourself with people who are smarter than you in certain areas so that you can tap into them. Because there's no way you're going to have all of the nuanced rules and regulations about all the things in your brain, you know, and you could search online and you could watch a few YouTube videos, but reality is you have to build a team that are going to be there to support you and have your best interest in heart and also your kids as well. So it sounds like to me, Lisa, you know, need a financial advisor you know and trust who understands your local jurisdiction, your city, your state, your country. You know, if you go down the path where you are going to take this through the courts, you're going to need a divorce attorney, right?
Or if you can get a mediator.
A mediator is the preferred.
Mediators
cheaper, better, happier.
Cheaper, better, quicker, happier.
Right.
But if you have to, then definitely embark on the divorce lawyer.
Right. And then, you know, I would also just sort of say you need a therapist at some point, right, to help talk through the emotional stuff that goes through it, right?
Absolutely. You will have a much quicker, much cheaper mediation or divorce if you're not trying to sort your dirty washing there, because in reality, you're going to have quite a hard experience because you're going to find financial advisors, mediators, and judges who say, like, this is not for us to sort out. We're here to sort out the division of the property.
Right.
So you will be far better equipped if you are absolutely getting emotional support. This is identity changing, the core of who you are. And the minute you start going into that land, make sure you've got someone really good to hold your hand, as well as you need good lawyers and good financial people. The most important thing is that you come out the human who's able to achieve this vision of the better life that you can create for yourself.
So I just highly recommend, if you're listening to this episode right now, you've been feverishly taking notes as Lisa talks, check out her website. It's workingwomenswealth.com. She's gotten quite a few other episodes she's done on her podcast specifically on this topic, breaking it down, simplifying it for you as well. And then in addition, you know, of course, they're financial advisors. So Lisa's, this is her jam. This is what she does. So if you are based in South Africa or really anywhere in the world, reach out to Lisa and her team, and I'm sure they can spin you in the right direction. So Lisa, I have a few questions I like to ask everybody, and we've asked these to you before, but I'm going to ask you again because, you know, things might have changed since the last time you've been on the episode. Tell us, what's one book or blog you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
One that's really challenging me at the moment is Brené Brown's book, The Gifts of Imperfection. It's one of her earlier books. So people are often focused on her latest work. For me, something triggered me to go back and read this book. And the part that is stirring me is this concept of the difference between belonging and fitting in.
Yeah.
So belonging is when I don't need to change who I am to be with you.
Yeah.
Fitting in is what we are designed through evolution and time to do because we need to stay within a tribe. And it's been really challenging me in my work life and in my personal life on seeking out circumstances where I feel I belong and doing a lot of work on when is it that I feel I belong. And it's been enlightening for me to go on this journey of, you know, kind of where do I really feel like I belong versus when am I trying to fit in? Yeah. And it takes quite a lot of reprogramming to actually kind of say to yourself, you're overcompensating to try and fit in. You know, just get back in yourself. You know, anchor yourself.
It's been a while since I've read that book, but thank you for that reminder. We'll put the link in the show notes for people if you guys want to check that out as well. I remember it being very powerful when it did come out. So tell us, who's somebody in your network that you just feel is up to brilliant things right now? We could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast as well.
So there's a South African financial advisor called Gugu Sadaki. And Gugu grew up in apartheid South Africa and has a real passion for financial literacy, not only in adults, but also hugely in children. I recently interviewed her on my podcast, and she has written a book called Three Little Piggies, and it's essentially give, save, and spend. And I just believe that anybody who is working on financial literacy especially in young kids and people who aren't, who never came from the means to learn financial literacy. They are just people who deserve to have a spotlight shone on them.
Yeah.
So I really recommend that if you want to educate your kids on give, save, and spend, My Three Little Piggies is the series that she has written. She's a financial advisor. She has her own wealth management company, and her focus is financial literacy to the people who don't have access to it. So she's someone I really admire and have great amount of respect for.
Brilliant. We will link her up in the show notes as well so people can check her out. So I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. What are you grateful for today?
Today, I am extremely grateful for my three little girls. I have just spent 10 days in America, and I came back to the hugest hugs that any human being could ever wish to receive in their life. My husband also happens to be in America at the moment on work, so I haven't had him yet. But when I arrived home and I had three little girls melt into my arms, I don't think there is any human being luckier than I was in that moment of time, of feeling absolute appreciation, love, and the depth of human bonds that you can have with your little people. So I'm grateful for that. And also, 10 days away makes you realize how grateful I am and how much I miss them. So I'm really in that halo of love that one has when you just get back before normality kicks in.
Yeah, well, and if you are going through a big, scary divorce right now, remember, get back to center, do the little things that nourish you. And even remembering hugs help a lot. In that big, scary times, it helps you get to the next step. So I'll put the link in the show notes for everybody to get connected with Lisa and her team. Again, it's workingwomenswealth.com, and links for connecting with her on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. So you guys can find Lisa. She is a wealth of knowledge. You truly are. And I'm grateful for you and the fact that you come on and can share all the things that you know and shed light on this, because you're making the scary stuff less scary. And I also want to mention that Lisa's new book, Deep Grooves, Overcoming Patterns That Keep You Stuck, it's coming out in June of 2020. So Lisa, I want to have you back on just before the book comes out, because I really want to talk about that. And let's simplify big, scary change and how to get unstuck. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Good. Well, so Lisa, my last question for you today is this. Someone somewhere, she's listening to this episode, she's feverishly writing it, she's feeling the panic rise all the way up into her neck, and she's really in the thick of it. She sees her marriage is about to go pear-shaped. What's one thing you could just whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
You were made perfectly. Don't ever lose sight of it.
Yeah.
These things are seasons, horrible seasons, terribly painful seasons. But never allow it to change your sense of worth. You were put on this earth for a purpose. You have human beings that love and adore you. You will get through this phase. It will be hard. It will be tough. But you are inherently perfectly made for this life that you have got so much future ahead of you. This is a season and a phase, and it's really tough. And you will reach the bottoms of that valley. But that view from the mountain on the other side is beautiful, and you will come out stronger and more centered in your purpose, because that's unfortunately what difficult times does for us, is it centers us in our purpose. So I would say to her, you're perfect just as you are. Do not, even for 1 minute, allow this to seep into your soul. Work on strengthening who you are.
And keep going.
Oh, 1 foot in front. That's how you climb a mountain, 1 foot at a time. That's all you can do.
Lisa, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Take care, Mary.